practice time. It is that time again, and we're right on time. So let's get our spine with its natural kind of arch shapes. If you look at your skeletal frame, you have those three curves. So we're going to work on really two layers of that to start with, our back to the bolster across in horizontal fashion. But where the feet are planting themselves is to take almost an awkwardly wide stance to present your descent onto the bolster. So let your spine, and the belly kind of protrudes right when you lower down on the bolster. It has that ascension. So when you descend back, I want you to be very clear that you have a blanket under your head, and you'll feel this deepening arch. But to prevent an ache from that deep arch, we're going to walk our feet so they're wide and they walk towards your seat, like you've got big flippers on. Another prop idea, huh? And then slide a block, which is flat and across, so it's horizontal under your rear. And then noticing if that is a natural reaction that you kind of cling to the block to prevent the arch. So noticing our tendency is kind of to go away from maybe what might be therapeutic sometimes in this practice. So I want you to notice the natural tilt of the pelvis and let that occur. So you don't have to flatten out your back, in other words. And then we will take a sand to the frontal hip bones. And when the frontal hip bones have that sand in the crease, you can either stay with your knees bending and your feet wide, maybe the knees rest together. And then eventually you'll want to straighten the legs. So give yourself time to get to that layer of length. Doesn't need to be right away. Reach to the belt overhead and grasp and expand with a careful selection of movement, of opening and broadening, not just the hands on the belt, but actually the chest circulation. So let's come into the beginning phase of breathing with the courtesy of the props supporting our bones and our internal awareness. And as you navigate the reach of the feet and the arms and the hands overhead, let the eyes land internal to closing. And feel that even if the eyes relax, it's not as if it's a time to check out, but a time to check in with your breath. So pacing the movement, and the key is the movement of breath. Ensure that the neck feels safe. If the blanket is too low, you can always scrunch it up to a little more height. And also ensure that the detail with the legs is something you could stay with this habit for a little bit longer. So if it's particularly intense in your back, then you will go back to bending the knees. And notice the arch in the spine. So that's what you kind of trade off with that, is if you bend the knees, you're going to have a tiny bit more arch through the whole back. If you straighten the legs, the arch moves into the higher parts of the back, right? Your lower back adapts. So we're all unique in our how we compensate with each side. So as you work with the hold of the belt, I want you to try to select moving your hands out quite far. So if I have my elbows on the blankets, I'm going to distance my elbows off of the blankets for a moment and move my hands as stretched out as they can on the belt. And then let my arms actually remove themselves from that grasp and relax the back of your hands on the floor. and feel as if you're in almost like a pentacle pose, right? Your arms are almost in this X frame with the body. And if that does some awareness potential with your breath, we're intelligizing the shoulders, the breathing patterns. So inhale for a count of 4. And let the breath out for a count of 5 to 6. If your legs are straight and you're a little concerned about the knees, you might work with relaxing the foot versus pushing and flexing. So feel a little bit more comfortable footing. Because you're not trying to fit your feet in a shoe right now. You're just letting them be natural. You know, after all the sounds in your environment have collected and you've accepted and moved internally, let's take the arms so they space to reach behind you without the belt, straight back. So there is that elongation in the rib cage. Okay. Now you're going to bend the knees, walk the feet in towards the seat. So you have that perch of the block underneath you. And as you reach the hands together, interlace, turn the palms straight back. Feel where that reaches through the arms. Hastasana arms, so you're pushing into them. It's liberating to do this arm work when you're on your back because gravity is moving you into this openness for the chest. Okay. So select a moment here where your arms stay reaching back, interlacing at the fingers, at the roots. Okay, and we're going to slide this into the side body. So move the sand, and once you move that away, we're going to start to roll to our left. So I'm going to lift up the block and just nudge it aside. We're going to go into that side sage, and I want you to work so that you're pushing into the bolster a bit. So get kind of bolster cozy. And if you have a ball, you can put that on the inner right leg. You can use a block. But when this whole rib surface has been kind of warmed up to roll and then work from the front rib to the side rib, a sandbag can be ultra helpful, but also a block overhead. So we're kind of swooping right into this in the beginning layer of practice. We want to use all our moments intelligize, right, is the word today, intelligize, it's an actual word. So when I have the work with intelligizing the shoulders, have the arm between the bolster and the blankets. I have the reach of the side, and if you happen upon mostly feeling this in your shoulder and your arm, but not your ribs, then if there's a little bit of a short of circulation, right, some sort of challenge, you might decide to move your right arm open. I suggest you feel movement with this arm, even if it's very tiny, you know, small rounding patterns to loosen up the shoulder. And if it just feels like there's some goop stuck in there and you can't quite feel this slender lengthening sensation through the side into the arm shoot, then let movement be part of the practice on this one today. Or bring the arm down by the side or to the left arm. So cycle that reach for the ribs. Feel awareness from the right leg, sending it a little bit back. But use the ball or block if you have that, so that the height of the leg, right, is in alignment with your hip, right? We don't want the knee to drop. because it would cause some torque and twist in the actual knee. So where we feel that right arm is completely individual for each person. So find your awareness through the side body. And then as you maintain a breath pace, so you can actually arrive in the shape. It's pretty simple. So shape arrival here. If your neck is tight, you want to let your head really rest into the blankets. Let your head rest. It's a different kind of head rest. And you're not pushing back into a chair. You're letting your head release down to the blankets and find the opportunity to selectively work on your intercostals to get more air into your lungs. Good. Now a few more moments. We'll be in these side stages for a short time today. It'll feel like enough time. And in the manner of that length, here's a way that we might work our bones and kind of select how the grooves, right, the spaces between not just obvious ribs, but even the thickness of the hip zone, the hip socket, all the thickness of these bones, that's a little challenging to kind of loosen the cogs in that area. So when you move your sand away, the sand away motion, we're going to try getting our front of the right leg stretching. Okay, I know this looks like we're doing something, but if your ability to hold on towards your foot is possible, we're going to give that a try, which is a quad stretch, a very generic one. But when you rotate your right shoulder down and then you come up, what you could do, depending on your knee and so forth, is take that bolster so it's under your, well, it just stays there under your left elbow. But you're moving your right hand back to hold onto that right ankle to stretch through the whole front, specifically of the right leg. Understandably, this could be a little bit challenging for a knee, but I'm using the ball and I purposely have it pretty close to the inside of my right knee. It's not always the easiest thing to maneuver, but it gives a little softness to that. So instead of trying to pull the foot as firm into towards your body, just feel that you hold the foot, that's plenty. And then feel your left elbow on the bolster and see if you can move your hip a little forward, this right hip. Now, left hip doesn't have much to do because it's got to hold you up, but it's your anchor. So feel like you're moving into a pelvic tilt, like you're doing a bridge pose on your back, but it's a little different here, right? Because you're holding a foot, you're basically isolating that whole joint. So feel the shoulder trying to motion back and then come out, and we'll move the ball and we're going to set up for Baddha Konasana. So we're going to find this whole kind of rhythm change, turn the bolster up, tip it up on the blankets, get your belt and your blocksa, and find the belt connection. And I would immediately just push it together. And as you lean your body to a sitting bones stack, right, your sitting bones sets, place the belt over, even though this is a little too small of a loop to hold me. Okay, so I'm going to loosen that as we've done before. This is all expecting that we know how to get into this one. So I've got my belt around the ankle, spatially connecting to the leg, and then as I move my belt loop, it's just touching the adductor. It's not pushing into it. So make it comfortable. You want to be able to push your feet forward on this one today. So we don't want to make it as snug as we can to the groins, but feel when your feet are forward and you have your blocks under your legs. You got a ball nearby for reasons to come. But when you lower back, if you like sand on your feet, you can place it across. If you have two sandbags, you can have one on each inner thigh. And if you decide to have a sandbag breathing experience, you can add one across the ribs below the sternum. And sometimes a practice can be enjoyable to kind of explore the basics that we all know and work on how you thread them together for the muscles, for the structural continuity. So I have the legs and they're fairly comfortable with the feet pushed forwards. Now, if you want a deeper stretch, you would take the blocks farther out so they're just under the knees. But I would recommend using a block set, no matter how flexible the legs might arrive at. We want to set up for success in the SI joint and not jam the joint, right? So having a little bit of breathing room and still get some openness through the adductors. So if I have my sand and I send the arms out, reach your hands around to the elbows. And as they move back, grip a hold of your arms. Feel what is your first crossing, right? Is it your most comfortable side? And feel what is comfortable about that. Is it the length of that armpit? Does it just feel more open? And if it is that experience, you might slip into the other arm crossing and just change it up now. And then we can notice that sometimes our habits, right, the places that we might compensate more for some various reasons. So feeling if you can find some intelligence in that second side with the arm crossing. The emphasis is very simple on the armpit chest opening. If it's odd in your shoulder, it's too much building pressure, you just bring your arms open. Anytime, we all arrive at the arms to the floor. So take your time to deciding, but continue this little bit of successful awareness that has started to evolve in the armpit chest from the last few poses. Our pocket full of poses that we've done so far. So reach internally through the ribs, breathing, soft belly. And this shape might feel as if it's a very honest arch in the spine where we can regulate the spinal column in this arch because the knees are in this channel. So pretty meant to be shaped for supporting, opening the front spaces, stimulating the circulatory paths of the breathing muscles and the draining of lymph and the resting of the organs. So whatever might be occurring in the organs, if there's any digestive afterthoughts or anything you notice, feel that the breath is not shallow, but it's full at the belly. Okay, now we're going to shift the pose, but it'll be very simple for the hips. So if you slide the sand away and then unbuckle, we're going to bring the feet so that they are lifting the knees up, right? So as I push down into my side of my foot and then my heel, then I wiggle my feet out so I can feel the bottoms of them. Now, notice that our blanket stack is different on this one. I mean, it's the same height as we're used to, but it's under the bolster entirely. So you might be one that fidgets with the blanket. So if this is not going to be helpful for your neck, then you might need to shift or get a towel and put something under your head. For most of us, this will be fine, but recognize you might need those things. So slide the left foot up towards your seat. And then as you move the right knee open, you're actually better off to put your hands down by your hips and then feel the push of the left foot real deep into the ground, and then lift up that right foot and cross the ankle. Now my spine slides down, my buttocks slide a little bit down so I can compensate. It's a compensatory pattern, right? To get the foot to cross to the ankle, to the knee, well, ankle to knee. So get a ball or a block, that's fine too, at the upper outer left hip, and you're going to lean your body weight to that ball. Okay, now, yeah, notice if your left foot is close to you, as close as it could go, does that affect your balance for the position for the hip? Meaning, are you requiring yourself to hold your right knee with your left hand to do the position? Or does it feel adequate without grabbing the knee? And it might work better. I like to hold the knee personally. It feels like it's kind of a connected pose. Feels like I'm connecting the dots. But some might be a little leery of that. Knee leeriness. Okay. So the arms can be in this position, hand holding the knee or both arms resting. You could also stretch your right arm back besides your head. So feel when you grasp on, and when your body leans the leg, both legs are leaning to the left, aren't they? Yeah, and the sitting bones are not sitting, right? They're open. And the sacrum is stable. So a few more moments. Yeah, and anything you want to sample in this frame. So let's say you're just really curious about your limitations, your quality of opportunity here with the joint. You might let go of the knee, you might bring both arms back, or bring both arms down and just feel the limit. The ankle gets a workout too on the left foot. It really does do some work there. You'll feel it maybe fatigue. And then when you come back in center, feel if you can let the right leg just simply uncross, feel the foot close to your buttock, and then it's easy to cross the left leg after it's been set up from the last shape. A little easier. So when I put the ball to the right side, I just set up right away and start leaning my body weight into that ball. And as you set your body to kind of zigzag to the right side, the closer your right foot is to the rear, it might feel more stretch in your ankle, more work in the foot, but it's an opportunity to feel that or to back off from that option. So reach perhaps to your left knee and feel how you absorb the sensation in your hip. Yeah, use the opportunity to sense the space across the sacrum. Feel the lower part of your back below at the sacrum, the base of the spine. And the left arm might reach behind you. So noticing what your selected movements could be in this position. So you're not just having to create still shapes. You're moving to them each time you switch a pose. So with that left arm motioning back or behind or to the side of you, isolate the left hip, the good hip, the good hip. Even if it's contrary to your immediate thought there, see if you can sense the circulation boundary in the hip. Yeah, no requirement to stay steady with the foot. If it's bothering you, if it's too much foot fatigue for the pose, you can slide your right foot a little farther or downwards, and that will probably ease that up. But I find that it makes my knee a little fragile in the right knee if my foot is wandering farther down. So the closer I can pull that right foot up, I feel a little bit more secure, surprisingly, in my right knee joint. You might have something else. Okay. Now, as you let the grip relax, feel the shift in that left leg, and we're going to carry this into side sage on the right hip down. So what I'm trying to keep us today is in this movement kind of therapeutic modality. So you're going to work with shifting the ball. And then as you take that left leg off, you could rock side to side with your foot hooked to the knee. See, that'll keep the sacrum in this neutral space. Once I uncross and I rock my knee side to side, I kind of slip down. So when you move to your right, and you try to stay very connected to your bolster, you're going to shift it across and then add a block over to the other side. Add a ball to the inner left leg. Not too many big maneuvers, but a few important ones, right? And then that sand. Now, the sand selection might be critical for you to feel grounded and feeling that intra-abdominal pressure below the sand is comfortable. So the sand pressure can sometimes make the inner pressure kind of dissipate a little bit. So use the example of reaching either with the left hand over to the block overhead, or take the arm open, outwards, chest wide, expansiveness. You choose. Now movement is completely fine, mostly with the parts of the body that are kind of unleashed, right? The arm is pretty much it, isn't it? The left arm. The limbic brain, right? It has a little bit of movement with the upper chest. So completely feel that length in the left side. And let the right leg tuck up towards the bolster. So that stretches your back. And maybe be simple breathing. If there's any kind of snag and control in your hip, this is a good time this is the time, right, to explore how to loosen that. Maybe your sand needs to go just to hip. So it's very focused on your hip. Okay, so that feels like it's not quite letting the pose shape maneuver into opening across the hip layer, the hip barrier, then turn the sand. Now the left arm doesn't have to stay over, it could relax. You could stretch it open or keep some small cycle of movement with the left arm. The ribs, the chest. Okay, now this whole midsection, right, we'll consider that where we would point to our midsection, but we're going to try to branch that down through the left front leg. So most of us will think about that core, the whole layer from the intersection of the ribs down, even if it's focused on the side, but it's from there until about, the top of the hip bone zone. So we're going a little farther down with this. So when you roll to your right, I'm facing away in the moment, but what I want you to explore is sand free, okay? And then reach for that left ankle. And if it doesn't feel comfortable with your body, this kind of pushed into the bolster, you could put yourself up a bit, but then notice that's going to arch the back further, right? So you could do either on or down, or you could pull your blanket actually in and have a whole stack of height, huh? Right, that could be comfy. Get everything here to help you out. Okay, if you got the props, use them. But when you hold that left ankle, it might be too much for your knee. So for right now, I just lucked out that I have a block there and a ball, and that can hold that. And then I'm trying to get my hip to push forward and to stretch through the quad. So it doesn't mean I have to hold my foot to get this hip bone forward. Now this will be interesting when we go to bridge pose very soon. So this frontal hip bone forward, okay? I think we have a little bit of that awareness. I'll show you very clearly when we move in the next pose. And then as you let go of your foot or you shift, I want you to stretch the left leg forward and then use your turning pattern. Now, if your neck was a little grippy there, feel how you turn to look down. Push to come up, okay? And then take a belt. Oh, there's a belt somewhere nearby, I have a feeling. There's a belt right there. Okay, so take a belt. You're gonna sit in that tire again. Remember that from a month ago. Take your belt, buckle up, and I'm basically gonna make that belt circle under, so I'm sitting in it. I better buckle it up underneath me, okay? So let's see, bolster goes to the side. Unless you like to kind of lean into it for help, you could keep it there for the moment. Bolster goes to the side. I'm going to place it kind of down by my right lower side of my mat on the side yard. And then I've got my belt loop. Okay, so if you can see, the loop is fairly wide. It's going to create a hole, basically a place, it's a hole I sit into. And then when I take the belt up behind my upper back, right, it's going just under the armpit. And then as I lean back, I got to tighten it up enough so that I can get held in the belt. So lean back, make sure this is tight enough to hold you in a core balance. Now my head's got to lean back a little bit so I don't tighten my neck further. So if you lift up your legs, feel if you can flex. And if the belly kind of has a little protruding pattern, don't spend the energy on pushing that away, but feel that you're leaning into your belt and you're testing its powers of holding you up. And I want those of us that have plenty of experience with this variation of belt work to either have this as your boat pose today. Okay, now if your quads are not lighting up, your hip flexors are fine, you're utilizing the back line of the legs to hold you up. Door one is here, and door two is loosen the belt up and put your feet into the belt. This is the second option. And you'll come back to this that you've done before, likely. But you want to make it pretty close to your center. So instead of the legs dropping forward, you're getting them really close to you. So you're in like a forward bend position. It's just that you're sitting down instead of going from feet down the floor to dropping your head down. So find your flexibility too, right? Or the challenge of it. And if you're pushing forward and you're kind of losing your ground, then your belt's probably too tight, right? If it's just challenging as all heck, then take the belt, loosen it up, The ankle pressure is not really something we've resolved very easily on this one. But one place I focus is pushing my feet to such a flexion, maximum flexion, that my ankles are not touching together now. So I have enough flex in my foot, my inside line of my ankle bone is not touching, tiny bit apart. There you go. Okay. Yeah, so if the legs swing and that it's restricted, that's part of it, is finding the challenge. And then feel where the knees are very close, depending on your choice of belt use today, either around the legs or the feet. Feel if you can let the weight shift back and neither focus on the arms being pristine and forward, but feeling what position you could flow the arms out from the body to, out from touching the body. So the arms are either forward or they're a little bit open. Okay, they're not above you. And then push your feet into the belt so that you have to find your balance. Right, so it's not all about hamstrings and opening in the back. Okay, but feel, I think most of us have maybe the idea of the feet with the belt. Feel when you hold your belt to bend your knees, and you're going to loosen that pressure now as you lower your feet down. What we're going to take is to unbuckle this and then move our belt so it's over the top of your foot, right? It's going to be just over the top. Okay. Now step the feet about hips distance, or maybe you might go a little bit closer in just because it seems awkward. And then scoot your seat forward so your belt ends are really easy to grasp. And you're going to lower down carefully on one blanket. Right, so use one blanket here and place your head to a single, quarter full blanket. Even if you're a bridger that doesn't use one usually, we might take it away, but start with the blanket for the arch of the neck. And then start to grab that belt. You're going to tighten it around your ankle so you'll grab a hold on each side. Each hand has a part of holding the belt. And at first, kind of casually, slide your feet a little closer towards your seat, but have the knees certainly apart. Have the feet so that they feel as they're almost turned out, just a tiny bit. So if you kick your legs up and you kind of look at your foot placement, they seem like they're parallel. But then when I lower them down, I want my knees to feel like they move a little bit outwards right now, not squeezing in. Okay. So grasp the belt as close to as far down as you can. So it's a very strong hold. And then shoulders back, so you have an arched spine. And you're going to lift up your hips into bridge pose. And you want to feel that belt really snug at the very base of your leg, at the ankle. Okay, so you'll feel the hips lift to their maximum. And then lower the spine down. Now the main focus is the grip on the belt. So when you lift and lower, I want you to try to notice the integration of selective strength. So when I pull on the belt and lift up the hips, the arms holding the belt are doing like this grit work, but start to negotiate the feeling of your shoulders back. Now this is where those bridgers that don't like blankets under their head might start to shed it soon. But lift and lower, and we're going to fatigue on this one for a few more. So I push into my heels, I keep the whole sole of the foot down, and as I lift up my hips, you'll notice if your knees move apart outwards, you'll get a little bit more quad lift. Feel to the point where you notice what quad is more open than the other. So I want you to let the back have a natural arch when it comes all the way down. And go back to lifting again. take a few more of these. Okay, so we continue, and the arms, the legs are feeling some awareness. Your legs might get tired with this whole belt operation. Okay, now this last time, what we're going to do is loosen up the grip on the belt entirely. Open the fingers. And then slide your feet out of the belt, and you're going to step them to the other side of the belt. So you step it to the farther away to the front of your mat, the base of your mat. Now, if you grasp the belt and you kind of feel where it is, if you pull it up, it's right next to your rear. So the belt's just closer to your center. Now walk the feet in towards the seat. And then at this point, we're going to get a block, and we'll place it under the back of your pelvis. So you're going to lift up your hips, turn the block to the height that is appropriate for your spine, right? So it's a spine strength position. So if I lift up my block to the second height and it's the horizontal, it's across, right? You might notice, notice the things that are feeling kind of floating in your stomach, where everything kind of flows upside down. So the energetics of this bridge pose is inversion right here. Okay, so I would recommend keep it second height. I know some are educating to go to the third height. And it's just it's nice to stretch the spine that tall, but it seems to be the nervous system gets kind of stressed by forcing that lift. So instead of compounding that today, we'll keep it simple. Now, taking the legs, so we lift a foot up off of imagine if your block was at the very top and you try to do this one. Lifting both feet up, you might teeter over. And then you're solid on your block. Now the block could be low. It doesn't have to be the second height, but take both of the legs up. And I want you to get a hold of your belt. It's still there. And when you grasp a hold, I hold the belt with the palms open to the ceiling. Okay. And I try to get my shoulders to squeeze back and down into the floor. So it's an actual deep, movement of the chest to open. So the reason I'm keeping the blanket now is this would be a typical classic Viparita karate with maintaining my blanket under my head. Okay, so that's an option though. Now, can you separate the feet? Well, obviously they separate, but the leg has a separation. And feel the feet flex, but also rooting down into the back of your pelvis. And it's lifted, right? So you don't have to spend more energy trying to levitate, right? You've got your block to hold you up. So hold the belt and move the shoulders back and down. Okay, now can you keep that grip with the belt? It doesn't have to be really painful, right? So if you find parts of your spine are gripping, I want you to loosen up the grip on the belt a little bit. Okay. Now feel when the legs are completely going into each other. And as you bend through the knees, feel the feet flexing. This is key, is the flex of the feet. Now I can try to move my knees farther away from my center towards the foot of my mat, and it's challenging on my stomach. So I want you to try that, which is likely vertical. Some of us might sense, oh my, it feels like they're dropping forward, but if you are able to see your image, right, you'll be surprised that they can be actually just straight up and down. And we certainly want at least that. It's up to you though. Okay, now the hold on the belt gets a little bit lax for most of us here. So when you stretch down the left foot, feel how the leg, I want you to try this. So you're going to keep the right knee up. The ankle might get a little weary, so just let it be an ankle, however it's attached to your leg right now. But hold the belt and feel if you can straighten the left leg. Just notice, can you get that leg to reach through the heel? Just feel. Feel heel. The heel feel. Okay, slide the left leg in, bring it back up, joining near the right leg, switch sides. Not to meet for very long. Right leg stretches down. This is optional. If you need to back off and keep both knees up, that's fine. Now here's the challenge is that left leg will probably try to swing in closer. So keep it straight up from the hip. Feel the right heel reach. Psoas strength. Okay, now as you slide the right foot on the floor, stay down with that foot. Bring the left foot down so you're in a typical bridge pose. There's nothing typical about our sequence, but we have our feet in a wider stance than you're used to with bridge. So now your glutes have to fire. Your rear muscles have to activate. So think of this as a bit like a squat, right? When you have to push into your feet to activate your glutes. So I want you to push down, and if your feet are a little turned out, don't spend energy getting up and staring at them, but feel your feet as if they're stepping into a bigger shoe, right? So you want to widen out the toes and then lift up your hips a bit. So the block might have trouble sticking to you, right? It might be slightly moving away. So lift up the hips, hold the belt, and then can you let go of the grip? Oh, sure, why not? Palms open, okay? And then as the hips are lifting, they can only go so far at this point. You're going to lift up your heels. That's magic. And then slide the block away. Okay. So when my block is gone, I'm going to reach my hands overhead so the palms turn towards the floor if they can. If that's just too much to add on, don't worry about it. Let your hands just go overhead. And then lower your spine. Try to feel that going slowly. If it's really hard for you to go slow, then let it go downwards. It's okay. But slide the weight down through the spine. Okay? And once you're about to get the very base of your, well, maybe the base of your spine or even the sacrum down, I want you to just stay a little bit off the floor. So try to stay with that. Lower your heels. So you're a little bit off the floor with the very base of your tail. We can't see if you are or not, but try to trust that for the hip flexors to be really peaked and warmed up. And then lift the hips back up again. My arms are overhead. Now you're trying to completely lengthen that whole front rim of the hips. Breathe. And then as you lower the hips, you're going to stretch the arms up towards the ceiling and lower the spine and feel the razor sharpness of the arms moving straight down. Okay. Now as the left leg lifts up, we're going to bring the right leg to lengthen. Your belt is probably kind of underneath your legs. So slide it away and add the belt now, holding it. You're going to reach it under your left foot, take the leg up, grasp a hold of the belt with just your right hand now. Pull it together with the right hand and cross the left leg to the right. If you have limited space, you want to get away from any limitation and let that left leg really go over to the right side. So does it have to be hip height, or it could be moving downstream? Okay, the only thing we're avoiding is trying to pull it up over to the right. So it's across or downstream. And flex through the foot, really feel from the hip, through the leg, through the heel. Open the left arm. Yeah, if your bolster happens to be there under your leg, you're going to add it in a few moments. So just prepare for that and all the preparations. And now bend the left knee, and slide the belt off the foot. Left thigh is going to release over on top of the bolster. So I encourage you to get the ball at your sacrum or something, right? If you have a little massage ball, something to anchor this area that has been energized for a while, holding up your spine and sensing this, the selective attention in your glutes and your hip joint. So use that ball to kind of ease that motion of reaching this out open on the left hip, and add sand to this left outer leg. If it's possible to add some weight doing it in the beginning, and you can adjust it with time. You can slide the sand a little farther to the knee so it creates this traction, and as it kind of rehabilitates these tissues from the last position, you're going to let the left arm open, okay? And the core collarbone space stretches out to the armpit chest and then beyond through the veins of the arm, so the left elbow might bend. And if your head rolls to the left and maybe your eyes relax, span both arms out. Good. Let the eyes find where they relax to help the neck relax. Now, if you have that crossover connection from your legs, do you feel any potential? You know, part of taking a session is, I know a lot of the wording can sometimes feel just too full in the brain, but some of it's a reminder of, you know, kind of educating your movement process, right? Or contributing some ideas with it. So it maybe leads you in a path of awareness. And so you take what works, put earplugs in for what doesn't. And when you notice that leg is crossing, it's the only way that we're able to transfix this lower bone structure so that the ribs can actually go left. You know, and that to me is still the immediate challenge, is to feel this cross section. So I've got from my kind of navel center below is going right, kind of, and my navel center up is going left. So it's a total twist. And then there's other things going on too. So can you peacefully breathe in the shape? And wherever your head turns is by wherever you're looking. And accepting that, accepting the role of your breath to soothe you is the main layer here. It's not even a physical thing you'll see, you know. You know, if that sand is across the leg or right on the hip, slide it across. So it's moving the stretch in the direction you want it to go versus just kind of tossing the sand. Try to slide it in the direction of the knee. Let that skin have motion. And then keep these fibers reaching right on the left leg. So when we do things where we swing the hip and we try to glide the back waist, just get a feeling of that positionally. And then we're going to take the ball away, and I want you to kind of imprint this one, like have some sort of a brain cell that will remember this, a muscle memory. So when we do pigeon today, I want you to kind of just recognize these connections, because that's a little bit, it moves in some different lanes of travel, but it's similar. But when you roll onto your back and you hook that left foot to the right knee and you get your back centered, like very steady centering of your back. And then draw the knees in towards the chest, holding the back of the right leg. You know, it offers some similar feeling in the left hip. It's a very boxed pose, right? This direction is not very movable. It's for sort of a fixed position. So notice the fixed position of the pose position, okay? But lift the right leg up and lower it back down. So alternate lift and lower the right leg. The foot doesn't come to the floor though, unless you happen to have an extremely long shin, could be. So as you lift and you lower, likely not to be. And if you have a sandbag hanging off your ankle, right, that might go down. Sounds like a terrible idea. Okay, so as you feel that right leg lifting and bending and hinging, do you feel that when you bend your right leg, that it kind of pushes the left foot a little bit towards you? So I want you to be a little cautious on how it pushes that foot. So I want you to feel like you can have the left outer ankle, the side of the left foot, very secure into the right knee, or the right just above the knee, right? So that you stay really safe around the knee joint, the left knee joint. Okay, now last time you push into that locked position, we're going to uncross and simply hold the kneecaps or the back of the legs and circle the sacrum. So you're going to hold on to both legs so that you can massage the outer rim of the sacrum, and then feel where that boundary is. So if you really reach your knees to the right and you kind of peel off the left side of the back, it can feel kind of nice to get that body weight and massage. You can also do this with the ball under your sacrum. If you want to add the ball, it's nice to have that tactile, right? Have that sensory ingredient in your practice. The ball can be that because it has, it's actually a responsive surface. Sometimes your body isn't as responsive. Okay, now lower the feet. If you have the ball under your back, you might leave that. And sometimes it's nice just to lie on it under your sacrum and just kind of have it there and let that do its magic, right? Just having that ingredient of lift in the sacral base. Take the bolster to the left side. We're going to start with the belt. So I want you to have the bolster on the left besides the leg. And now if you've got the ball under your sacrum and you're just massaging into the back of your pelvis, take just a few more moments for that. And noticing when the knees are in this hinge, when you push into your heels to lift up just a tiny bit to get your ball away, lower your spine, and then take a belt and pull the belt around your right foot and lengthen the left leg down. Cross the right leg to the left. So go immediately into that service for the hip. And lower the foot down or stretch it across. Feel this rib cage very quieting and centering for the core. Right arm could stretch back, it could go open. It's fun to frolic in the moment, whether you did that on the last side or not, just to explore that potential with the limbs. What might be interesting to you, while you remain for a few more moments in this, is that the right leg it's kind of a free leg in the belt, right? So you can kind of move the belt, you can tug on it, and feel if you can have that leg kind of like just be a limp leg, so you're not muscling into it in the moment or flexing. So it's interesting when you tug the foot and the leg is not like energized, it's just kind of there, and you can get your hip joint to move, maybe to manipulate it a little bit to open that space onto the side of the leg. Okay. Now, when you're ready to cross over to the bolster, you can do it anytime. If you're intrigued by this, you can stay with the belt on the foot. Okay. And then when you slip the belt away, you want to feel, well, I can't tell you how to feel, but you know, the interesting part of this changeover is this, the inner right thigh might get so bound up that it doesn't shoot over. So you might have to play a bit with this swinging of the leg over to the bolster. So do whatever you need. If you need to scoot around, if you need to move your bolster closer or put a blanket on top of it so it's actually adaptive to your body's needs. You know, if you don't land on the bolster, it's not fair, right? You need to get a blanket and make it work. So cross it over and then add your sand, maybe. Add the ball to the sacrum. And then as you arrive, feel what the left knee is doing, the left leg. If that leg is crossing and twisting and turning so that you can habituate this pose easier, then use that leg turn and then take the ball and adjust that so you can open the right arm out. Okay, so what I'd rather have you focus on is from the navel center down to the hip layer, crossing it over to the left, and then that cross section, the right arm open. Turning your head to the right. Okay, feeling a slow and a low breath in the belly. Slow, low breath. Can you be in the shape and steady the mind, focusing, feeling. Now, if that inner right thigh is, shaking, that's a message that you need more height under your leg. But you might be able to adjust your arch of your spine to support these little things. I think the more you practice, you'll start to find habits you create, some good, some not, right? So that you can stay in the shape. But find the basic nature of opening the chest area, okay? And imprint in the mind on this one, right? For the pigeons ahead. So just kind of notice what part of the back that stretches, meaning your back, into the hip. Kind of like, since the nerves, the spine, this is all connected, right, into your hip. They're massively connected. And then they connect in sensation and good and bad. So work on really laying in and getting that full reach through the back. And then if the ball is there, I would move it away. And then as you get your sand, and you might slide it off, have your leg and your knee will come back center, and you'll roll to your back with your right foot to the left knee. And when you push into your left foot to adapt your back across the floor in a horizontal path, feel when you pull your left leg in, if you can lift up the foot. So just stretch it on up. Now let that left leg lift and alternate bending and lifting. And like you're pumping water, okay? So that's kind of the same idea I think of. So it's like a little bit of a pump, okay? So when you're lifting that left leg, it might not be doing very much that you can physically see with the right knee and the right foot, but there is these kind of micro motions, right? You can notice when the knee is bending, maybe some direction into your back muscles. Sometimes we practice things that are in our education that we just do. It's supposedly good medicine, right, for our circulatory structural needs, but we don't know why. So when you move this alternating pattern, feel when you get to the what you think of as the end range or the final shape before you kick back up. And notice if it's solid, right? You feel solid into your hip. Okay. Now, when your leg moves up, we'll take a final motion. Then feel the knee. Notice if you pull with your hands, you're trying to get the low back, right? The back sheath kind of level and lined up. Very challenging. And pigeon pose is where you get it usually right, because it's not so cattywampus in the back, right? Because you're forward, right? You're seated, right? So let's just notice this for a moment. What is occurring in our back section? Okay, the inner thigh might feel this too. And then when you unwind this position, lower the foot, you can keep the foot in the air, uncross, and we're going to be moving into feeling, if you want to use that ball again across your sacrum and roll on it, that's totally fine. But feel when you have a hold to your legs and roll up, and then get your blanket. We only got one, I think, on our mat yet. So roll up, get your blanket in, and then feel if you can move to your side and then bring your legs back. Doesn't have to be perfect because I'm still figuring things out. You might be figuring things out too. So I roll over to my belly zone. I'm going to get my blankie under my knees. I like that much better. And I want you to lower down. If your bolster's in your way, just kind of push it so it's not such a challenge under your head. And then lower down to your Sphinx pose. Your elbows are down, your knees, and then there's this arch in the back, right? There's naturally going to be quite the arch, but we don't have our bolster under our core for this Sphinx pose. So feel where your legs are centered. If you're still fussing around to get here, no worry. Just take your time. And then feel if your elbows widen a little bit, so your hands are closer in than your elbows, a little bit wider. Now, when my elbows are open, and my hands are not touching, but they're moving directionally, thumbs are facing towards each other. We're going to lift up our head forward, tummy time, and then feel if you can shrug your shoulders back, if they have any ability to actually create some balance. Trying to get into our upper body a tiny bit right now. I know we've been lower body focused. Okay, good. Now, I know with your head looking forward this way, the arms have to do double time to hold you up. That's why it's called tummy time. Okay, so when you lower down your head now, you're going to slide your hands back so you feel like you're a grasshopper kind of variation with the arms. And then feel, this might be one where you might actually want your bolster under your forehead or a sandbag or a block so that you're not really having to tighten your neck to hold your head a little bit up. Now get your elbows really close by your side. So this is arm behavior work, right? We just had our elbows out with them down on the floor. Now we have them up and they're squeezing towards your side. Now I have to kind of visualize as if I had something prodding my shoulder, the head of the shoulder back. So I don't want it to drop down. That's maybe grasshopper-like, but bring it back so you feel your shoulder blades try to squeeze in towards your spine. Yeah, just do that work, just simple. Not simple to do, but just the simple direction. Okay. Now, hands are going to move a little bit out. So they're still maybe on the mat, but they're not right next to your chest. And then when I start to push down into my hands, I've got to bring my elbows back, and then I'm going to lift up. So this is, right, moving to up dog. So you're kind of rolling through to lift up. This takes a lot of energy to get. So I might use my bolster for this next round. I want us to do some real basic baby back bend, strengthening our arms, our shoulders, our back. So next time you come down, use your bolster. So you're going to come back up to table pose. So we all have a place in between. Hands open, round your back to cat, chin to chest. Okay, inhale, arch. Okay, now feel what this is like in your back muscles when you're on hands. Okay, now slide in your bolster. Okay, and then as you have that under you, just try it again. So I'm going to lower down. I'm going to push my bolster in so I feel it under my legs a little bit. Okay, my front of my hip bones. Okay, now as I lower down, I'm going to go to Sphinx pose because we go to the full balance. Feel the elbows down. Okay, feel the tops of the feet. Now, can you bring your feet so that they are all the way to the very sides of your mat, right? So the legs are in a wide pattern. That means your knees too. So the knees might not go out that far, but I want your feet to be, they're centering out wide. They're not touching together. This will be easier in the back. Okay. So we slide the hands back, fingers open, and then we come up into cobra pose. So they don't have limbs, right? Cobras don't have, they're not with limbs. So we're using the whole strength of our core to get here. So I'm going to just do a baby back bend, barely lifting up, but I can feel it in my back. You can even feel the pulse at the belly. Now, when you have the fingers stretching open hand, you're going to lift up the heart towards the front of your space. Feel the spine working. And then as you lift up into up dog, does it feel easier with the bolster? I'm really assuming it will. And feel the frontal hip bones, the pelvis, right, pushing forwards into the bolster. It's kind of significant how helpful a prop is. Now, when you come back, toes under, you're going to have to hinge at those hips to get back, because all four creatures do that. So you hinge back. You don't have claws, but you're going to push down and lift up your knees and stretch out your legs. Most people come into dog pose if they give the option to wander into it. They kind of walk out their feet and the legs, and then feel your foot each side at a time. Meaning you don't have to reach your hands back and feel your foot, but feel it by movement. And then as you alternate, feeling the knees bending, I want you to stretch back into dog pose. Feel your head lower down. Okay, and then notice the knees. If they're kind of moving together in more of an X pattern, step your feet wide so they can't go close. And then as you walk your hands back to your blanket, you're going to slide your feet up, toes up on the blanket, heels down, stretch your calves, and then feel that natural arch in the spine, like you just had, right? A little bit of that. And lift up your bolster. I hope we all have one close by. And then lift that up and put the hands on the short end, and you'll feel that arch in the spine again, strengthening. So this has a little bit more strength work than we anticipate going into this final half of it, but we're getting there. So arms reaching, feel if this is a little better on your shoulders and your wrists than when your hands are on the floor. Just notice if yes or no, and then let the spine get that full stretch. So you get the choice to do your forward bend this way today, right now, or you can actually go with your hands down, holding your elbows. Now your toes don't have to stay up on the blanket anymore. If that's getting to be too much calf stretch, then go ahead and slide back and put your feet flat on the floor. And some of you will want to have that continuous, little bits of challenge adding. So when you hold your elbows, let your head lower down. Nod your head a little side to side. Change the crossing of the arms. Hold and let the shoulder to the elbow traction, let gravity have you. Now, as you lower the arms, if you've got your bolster up, you're going to lower that down, and we'll all slide our feet off of the blanket, but notice the toes parallel-ish. And then as you bend your knees, I want you to try to load back in towards your heels for a moment. This doesn't need to be a full squat by any means, but load back a little bit into your heels. Okay? And then project the weight forward and walk your hands front. And then as you move your feet together behind you, okay, we're going to reach the right leg up towards the ceiling. So we have a three-legged dog position. And we keep the reach back down to the left heel. So head towards the bolster. Okay. It's a little intense into that back of the left leg. Okay, now switch it off so the right foot down besides the left, and then spring up the left foot from the ball of the foot up and towards the heel. Push and push the floor away with the hands. Well, I would imagine you're doing that. Otherwise, you're completely spent laying on the bolster, which is an option. Okay. Now lower that left foot. Now sometimes one leg kicks up higher than the other. Let the focus be driven by the standing leg, what it feels. Now as you lower that foot, we're going to lower the knees. And we'll come into that toes relaxed. I want you to push the bolster quite a bit forward. And then hands are open and stretch forward into up dog. So let the front of the hip bones lengthen. Now this is such a peculiar place to try to lengthen but you can in pigeon pose where we're going. So, but the front of the one hip will lengthen forward, front of the hip bone, and the other will go the other direction. So when you feel the arch in the back, you're going to come back to a creative table pose, creative table. And then as you move your left leg forward this time, first we're going to stretch the front of the right thigh back. You're going to bring the left knee open, so the knee is on the floor in pigeon. And you're going to take that right thigh to lengthen back straight behind you and feel the arch in the spine, okay? So what I want you to work with is the hands on the floor or on a bolster. You can also put your elbows across on a bolster. This is good. And then I have to be a little careful not to compensate on the left hip more than the right for this version. So if I have my elbows down, I'm shrugging the shoulders down. And then I feel a very dedicated strength in my spine. I think this honestly has some spine strengthening potential because it's a frequency in a back bend that stays continuous, right? A lot of back bends are taught are the spontaneous type, right, where you can't really sustain them more than a few seconds. So this is a sustainable one. So notice your practice if it is doing that for you too. You can settle in the poses. And if this is getting a little on the edge for your knee, you want to put one more blanket under your seat. Then you want to add two. Or you could also take the blanket you have and wad it up, right, under that left buttock so you have a little more height, which is pretty good. I like that support. I'll take it. So a few more moments. You get that feel from the left buttock. Is it any similar to when we were on our back and we had that leg crossover we did? Some of those crossover poses. This is the other direction of it. It's the same crossing, but you look different. And now feel when you kind of sit, if you got the blanket bunched up, unravel that. Feel when you're sitting in the pigeon, left hip. And then we're going to come out of this side sitting. So instead of pushing back to dog pose, we'll come through a sitting pattern. So notice when your weight kind of rolls into your left hip and how the back can actually work its way to lengthening. And then when you swap sides, you choose. If you decide you want to kind of rock around and, you know, sit there for a minute before you switch the leg, that's up to you, okay? Otherwise, you're going to swing around and notice the difference when you come into this pose from sitting. You'll likely be able to move this foot farther up than it gets snagged back. It's just a movement process from the back of the pelvis that's different. So just kind of feel as you move into this as an inner thigh related. You can have your elbows on the floor or on the bolster, but use the movement pattern into the shape to gradually kind of feel that you pin the hip. It's a little bit of a fixed shape for the hip joint, isn't it? But movement can be really therapeutic here. Rocking a little side to side. Yeah. Gosh, our time is flying. Okay, well, at least we got our pigeons in and we'll get our legs up in a moment. That's good. Sometimes it's nice to have a simple blocks of sequencing and not how many poses, but intelligent. And what was the intelligize? Intelligize inside. Now, where the weight is in the left leg is important here. Right? We don't want to overload into the right hip joint, so we want to share. So watching your patterns of compensation, right, that you will have, right, side to side, unless you have some sort of metric. But what you did on the left side. Now notice on the right hip, the arch in the spine. And feel if you can do a little cat pose in this. Can you round the back tiny bit and feel that awareness in the hip a little more? Noticing your back muscles and your hip. And if you really feel the circulation concentrating into that right hip, in the last few moments of this, you might want to work with those cat-cow patterns, arching, rounding your back, or feel what you lie into in your hip. So coming up, too dramatic with the hands pushing might kind of lose some of the deeper work. So feel that you absorb the work. You know, that inner thigh structure has a little bit of like a pulse to it, right? It's almost like the idea we're going to do is going to inversion is that we have this adductor, you ever use like a TENS unit, that pulse. So there's like this pulse in the adductors right now from these two patterns, and then we're fleshing out is the key. So come around to the left leg swinging forward. And then we're going to take our legs on the bolster. So if you have two blankets under you, then this might be too easy, but easy is okay. And get a feel when you're seated upright and the feet reach forward. So flex through the legs, through the feet. I guess you can't really say leg pattern. So the muscles at the top of above the knee, those patterns start to grip. So we're going to let these flush out when we're up at the inversion. So even if you like to do challenging inversions, I recommend you try legs up the wall for this one, so you can actually calm and not muscle into it. So you're going to want to get a belt for this one today. So you're going to put your bolster up to a wall, and you might want a mat so you don't slide around, but it's not required. Some people do just fine without mats in their houses for practice. So up to you, but I want you to have a bolster. If you're next to a couch or a bed and that works for you, you probably don't need a bolster. But you're getting the legs upside down. So we'll take a sandbag. We'll have a belt, and you're going to sit next to the wall. And I tend to get kind of on the side of the bolster, like I'm almost falling off of it. So I have my edge of a hip. It could be any hip you want to use. You only got two to choose. But when you roll and you swing the legs up, the more adventuresome you get with this, you're going to find yourself kind of meeting your balance better, right? So you want to find that you're obnoxiously close to the surface you're going to get the height from. And you want to get that height, right? You know about getting altered from inversions. This is the height you're getting, is to get these organs to actually levitate a bit from their natural downward pull and rest them, okay? So you wouldn't want to be super full in your belly if you're doing an inversion. Just would be the smartest move, but you might notice your contents making sound. So we'll take our belt first on the legs. I can figure out where my buckle is. I'll get there. There it is. Okay. If you don't like to buckle up and you have like a just a sash or something, you can also just bound the leg. But at any rate, a belting of the leg, so they're connected at the mid thigh. And I'm going to make it a little loose so I can get my sand on. And then as I add my feet to the mix, I bring some sand topping to my sole structure. And I might lose my wall space. Sometimes you slide a bit away. So find the balance and emphasize the upside downness of it, the inversion energetic. And then you want to make the belt fairly snug so that you're not muscling into the position, so your muscles can relax. Okay, so flex, naturally find the resonance that works for you with the flexing, the placement of the sand that's nestled to your feet. Some of us like the sand closer to the roots of the toes, some towards the heels. Goal post arms. Let your head nestle into the blanket. And if you have any gear on your face, you might take that away. If you have an eye pillow, you might slide that across your lower frontal lobes of the brain, and then let that relax on that somewhat of the gray matter, right? But the connection of the eyes back into that gray matter. Resting the eyes surface back into the floor. Now feel the lift and lowering of the belly. And relaxing your breath. Noticing the frequencies in the body, starting to adjust to receive what's kindful from the practice, what feels respectful for your body as far as all the circulation that we've moved through. And let the body absorb and the mind settle besides that practice. Just observing yourself. Give it a few more moments. Now feeling the back adapting to this arch. It's not a big deal in your spine and it feels comforting. Start to access the upper ribs, the chest. So the body has its natural curves. Now we've got all of the curves that we're working through, all the contours of the shape of the body, or the shapes. Take a deep, slow inhale, and just letting the breath out. Feel it leave the body, sweeping the lungs. And as you explore the movement of the belly, the diaphragm has to go against gravity when you're upside down. So strengthening the breathing muscles. So with all these awareness options, see if you can just settle into that center place of the belly. Unbuckle the belt. And as the feet start to slide down the wall, you're going to adjust and balance the strength in your glute muscles here. So as I push the feet a little bit away and I bend the knees, you can toss your sand overhead. And as you move the feet to Baddha Konasana, knees out at the wall, you'll feel the opportunity to use your hands for good on this one. So they push the legs directionally to the wall. And the nice thing about doing this pose at the wall is that your back is, well, it's not completely straight, but you have a bit of a rounded flex spine, but you actually have both rounded and arched right in this pattern, depending on where you're pointing. But there's a little bit of an arch right at the very base. But if you're sitting and doing this, you round your back the whole time, right? So it's nice to really get this one right in the inner thighs, upside down too. Okay, now feel the outer bones of the feet touch together. However delightful that appearance, just notice the outer bones. They can push. And then before you stand on them, bring your knees together and roll to the side. Let your bones settle for a second there before you spring up. And then come up and find a seat and meet at your seat. Knees open, relax the hips, balance the back muscles. And as they elevate up to the shoulders, lift up your hands and allow them to meet together. So we have a blend of concentration and respect for each other in this practice. So feeling that collective, brain bows down to the heart center. Inhale here. And with exhalations, bowing into the space behind your heart. Namaste.